Good afternoon and welcome everyone. My name is Danielle Stackis and I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Relations at the Robert H. Smith School of Business. We're excited that you're able to join us for today's webinar, Beyond CSR, 5 Principles for Better Business, presented by Kim Robertella Glinka, Director of the Center for Social Value Creation, also known as CSVC, at the Robert H. Smith School of Business. This webinar is part of the Smith Office of Alumni Relations Professional Development webinar series, in which we hope to provide thought-provoking and valuable content that will help alumni like you achieve your personal and professional goals. During the webinar, we encourage you to use the chat box to share any questions or comments you might have for the presenter. Please feel free to submit questions throughout the session, and Kim will address them at the end of the presentation. Established in 2009, CSVC aims to educate, engage, and empower Smith students to employ business principles that help not just the bottom line, but also the world. Kim joined CSVC in 2011. Her career portfolio includes a decade of experience in project and program management, marketing and communications, and strategic planning centered on sustainability and social responsibility. Before Smith, Kim worked in the renewable energy sector, supporting startups and large-scale renewable energy developers. She has a dual Master of Science degree in Sustainable Environmental Resource Management from James Madison University and the University of Malta, and a BS in Business Management from the Smeal College of Business at Penn State University. When not working, you can find Kim playing in the garden with her young son Tyler and husband Tim, taking family walks in the woods with dog Coda, or attending live concerts at a local music venue. And now we'll get started. Kim, take it away.
All right. Danielle, thank you so much for that introduction. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm really excited to be with you today. Danielle mentioned the center's mission: educate, engage, and empower Smith students to advance not just the bottom line, but also the world. What drives this mission is our belief in a world where companies, communities, society, and the natural world can collectively thrive. And we think that business and industry, and business leaders in particular, have the opportunity to help us get there. And we're going to touch upon some of these ideas in the webinar today. So, since we're talking about going beyond CSR, let's start by framing CSR, corporate social responsibility. In general, most people tend to think of CSR as the do-good, feel-good kind of stuff. It's sometimes referred to as corporate citizenship, and the term has generally applied to efforts that go beyond what is required by companies, but efforts that have commonly appeared as one-off initiatives separate from the core business. In the early years, CSR was, Toys for Tots, food drives, employee volunteer days, and even things like implicit bias training, which we've been hearing a lot about recently because of the recent Starbucks example. This is all good stuff. It all matters. But again, historically, these are efforts that have had much to do with philanthropy and other one-off type of activities tied to charitable giving and responsible citizenry. But over time, this notion of CSR and how it's defined, and even its scope, has evolved. So some of you, maybe those who follow the space pretty closely, you may have a more progressive view of CSR. Maybe you think about CSR in more up-to-date terms, like, for instance, the definition used by the Financial Times, right? So FT currently defines CSR as a business approach that contributes to sustainable development by delivering economic, social, and environmental benefits for all stakeholders. So this definition, in my opinion, is a pretty leading edge view of CSR. And in fact, I would say it's a stretch to say that most companies think about CSR in this way, in a way that aims to deliver economic, social, and environmental benefits to all stakeholders. That's a big charge. And so this definition really sets a very ambitious standard. And it's also exactly the direction that we at CSVC think companies ought to be moving. And in fact, it really directly aligns with how we think about and how we frame social value creation, which, in a basic sense, is really about using the tools of business to advance economic, social, and environmental prosperity in a way, I might add, that is mutually reinforcing. But again, for most folks, their notions of CSR are more in vein of the kind of antiquated concept of CSR, right? And so, by and large, many of the people that we interact with and many of the students that we engage with, these future business leaders, they're thinking of CSR and its related concepts as separate, extra, nice to have type of activities and initiatives, or as responses or engagements from companies that are reactive to addressing some negative impact elsewhere in the organization. And so, we really feel that that paradigm is what needs to be flipped on its head. We're here to say, no, this is not just about the do-good feeling or about taking responsibility as a good corporate responsible citizen. This being a business leader today really means taking a more comprehensive view of prosperity to include social and environmental impacts. And so that brings me to the shift. So more and more companies are beginning to reconsider how they show up in the world, how they engage in and leverage markets, how they contribute to social and environmental well-being. The shift that is occurring is this. Companies are understanding, with the data to back it up, mind you, that being proactive about social and environmental impact is in fact good business. And as such, it is gaining a foothold in core business decision-making in many places. And it should. Issues of social and environmental significance relate to a variety of important and strategic business issues, including market demand, competitive strategy, risk management, supply chain logistics, and more. So the shift is really about moving from this general do good, do less harm tactic of the past to a specific and intentional economic, social, and environmental prosperity strategy. And one that really gets to the logic of the core business model. So to quote Rebecca Henderson, Rebecca is a professor of management and strategy at Harvard Business School. She says, "We are witnessing a big transitional moment akin to the transition from analog to digital, or the realization that globalization is a really big deal. Companies are beginning to pay attention to the long term, to the perceptions of their company, and to the social and environmental consequences of their products. And they're realizing that it is good business." So, with the time we have remaining today, and I do want to leave time for discussion at the end, so I'm really going to try for that. But with the time we have remaining today, I want to talk to you about getting beyond CSR by incorporating 5 principles for better business. Okay, so the principles that I'm about to introduce were developed by CSVC and released in 2017 with a really specific intention: to help our students understand the basic tenets of how together we can create a better world through business. These principles also help to bring down to ground, so to speak, this larger concept of social value creation and make it more accessible and digestible to the broader business school audience. Some of the concepts may feel familiar to you, and that's a good thing. They were inspired in part by existing philosophies and approaches. But ultimately, what we believe is that when companies are doing all that they can to embody these principles, that is what will move us closer to economic, social, and environmental prosperity. And that's the end game. And so with this framework, we're exposing our students to ways of thinking that will enable them as future business leaders to take part in this building of a future where companies, communities, society, and the natural world collectively thrive. Okay, so what are the principles? I'm going to briefly introduce the 5, and then we're going to go through the set in detail and discuss examples. Principle 1, lead with integrity, transparency, and purpose. 2, embrace stakeholders. 3, invest in the long term. 4, safeguard the natural world. And 5, leverage markets to address societal challenges. Now, keep in mind that as I move through the examples, the companies that I am highlighting are demonstrating that particular principle in action. I am not saying that all of the companies that I have featured are doing all 5 of these things to their utmost. This is a journey that we're all on. And so I just wanted to make sure that was clear. All right, so here we go. Principle 1, to lead with integrity, transparency, and purpose implies a deep commitment to ethical action, regardless of circumstance. Leaders who act in this way set the tone for their organizations and articulate a shared vision that helps facilitate dialogue, inspires loyalty, and enhances brand credibility. So I'm going to jump in with an example from Salesforce. In April 2015, you all might remember Salesforce made headlines for a gender and race pay gap. Then CEO Mark Benioff made headlines himself for his transparency and personal accountability in tackling this issue. When the company discovered the problem, he as a CEO owned up to the matter right away. He went public with the findings. He employed a rigorous process for analyzing the pay data, and he made himself publicly accountable for addressing the matter and literally just ending their pay inequities. So this has been a multi-year process, but they've stuck with it. As of this year, Salesforce has spent an estimated $6 million to correct this indifference. And Benioff has continued to be an outspoken advocate on this issue to date. And so, this example really highlights, in my view, this concept of integrity and transparency and how that comes to life through our work as business leaders. Principle 2 is embrace stakeholders. So we all know that shareholders need a return on investment, but we believe business works best when it creates value for a range of stakeholders. Customers, employees, suppliers, and society at large all contribute to this stakeholder fabric that allows a business to thrive. And when a business embraces these stakeholders, it can enable more meaningful work for employees, it can enhance the potential of their local communities, and ultimately increases profits for shareholders. So some of you may have heard about this letter that Larry Fink wrote in 2016. Larry Fink is the CEO of BlackRock. BlackRock is the world's largest asset owner with $5.7 trillion under management. So in this letter, he was speaking directly to all S&P 500 CEOs, and he stated explicitly, and I'm quoting this from the letter, he stated, "To prosper over time, every company must not only deliver financial performance, but they must show how they're making a positive contribution to society. Companies must benefit all of their stakeholders, including shareholders, employees, customers, and the communities in which they operate." Mr. Fink goes on to close that letter by saying, as we enter 2018, BlackRock is eager to participate in the discussions about long-term value creation and work to build a better framework for serving all of your stakeholders. All right, so this message this is a pretty powerful message that he's sending. I mean, this is coming from a person who's responsible for a $5.7 trillion asset portfolio. And a core part of his messaging is about embracing the stakeholders that make your business possible. It's a pretty big deal. In this letter, Mr. Fink talks about a number of different issues, but one of the notions that he really focuses on as well is this concept of long-term value creation. And that brings us to principle 3, invest in the long term. So global prosperity requires us to look beyond quarterly profits toward long-term economic, social, and environmental well-being. Business strategies that can align in this way require careful planning and a forward-looking commitment towards future generations. The UN Sustainable Development Goals, for example, offer a blueprint for businesses wanting to take part in a more prosperous, sustainable economy. And that includes a commitment to social responsibility and a return on capital. So one of my favorite examples on this principle is with Unilever. Paul Polman is well known in many circles. He's sort of a bit of a rock star to me personally. He's current CEO of Unilever. He took over in 2009, and when he did that, he made several bold decisions that have resulted in him having a reputation as a global business leader with a conscience. So one of the things that Pullman famously did was, and I think he did this like day 1 or week 1 on the job. So what he did was he stopped issuing earning guidance and full quarterly reports in order to shift the focus of the company toward long-term goals. Pullman himself says that he did this because the issues that Unilever is trying to attack with its business model are ones that need to be solved in the world today, right? These are issues of food insecurity, sanitation, employment, climate change, and these issues cannot be solved just by quarterly reporting. They require longer-term solutions and not 90-day pressures. So in the description of this principle, I also referenced the Sustainable Development Goals. So I wanted to quickly touch upon that aspect with a second example. Ericsson. Some of you may know Ericsson. They are a leading telecommunications provider. They have about 40% of the world's mobile traffic carried through their network. So Ericsson did something interesting. I think they did this in 2017. They actually assigned members of their executive leadership team to be champions of the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. So literally 17 executives at the company each have one of the SDGs that they are accountable to in their performance expectations. And so with that commitment, they are tasked with exploring and championing that SDG to figure out how it can relate into the business functions and opportunities that they're responsible for in their respective roles. So the company has said that this approach has actually helped to embed sustainability and awareness of responsible business at all levels of the organization, and that by going through this process change and by bringing the SDGs inside of executive commitments in this way, they've actually been able to seize new market opportunities and further align profit with public good. So principle 4 is safeguard the natural world. I think this is probably maybe the most straightforward principle to internalize, right? So I personally, I'm an environmentalist at heart, and so this one really resonates with me. You know, companies come in all types and sizes, but we all universally depend on well-functioning ecological systems because all of the food, water, and materials that we rely on every single day come from the natural world. So business has both an impact and a dependency on these systems, and therefore a vested interest in working with government and civil society to safeguard them. growing populations and threats to resource depletion really increase the urgency of acting on this principle. So one of my personal favorite corporate icons is Patagonia, and they've certainly been an icon of environmental and socially responsible business. So Patagonia is, so they were founded in 1957, and by staying true to their core commitment of having a positive environmental impact on the world, they've still managed to become a global brand, reaching more than $750 million in sales. And for the last 10 years, Patagonia has had a compound annual growth rate of 14%, and profits have tripled. And they've done all of this while maintaining a strict commitment to sustainability and their environmental priorities throughout their products and supply chain. Their current CEO, who was formerly their CFO when she joined the organization, is quoted as saying, "The fact that we are a successful business competing in our industry with much bigger and more capitalized players really is the proof that the values and missions of the company are a very powerful and important tool and a model for how business can and should be done in the 21st century. Otherwise, we're not going to have a viable planet to live on." I could not agree more. And last principle is principle 5, leverage market systems to address societal challenges. So business is not responsible for all the world's problems, but with certainty, business must take part in solving them. When focused on social and environmental challenges, markets can actually be really useful in driving scalable solutions that take us away from addressing problems through charitable giving and philanthropy alone. Further, there's a noted and rising demand for responsibly made goods and services, and this just further underscores the opportunity that we have to better the world while also pursuing economic prosperity. So I've got 2 logos up here: Goodwill, Hungry Harvest. I wonder how many of you are familiar with Hungry Harvest. They've become a bit of a poster child at the Smith School, and for good reason, in my opinion. So Hungry Harvest was created really from within Smith with an undergraduate student, and he was really concerned about addressing an issue of food waste and food insecurity. He was compelled by this statistic that nearly 49 million Americans, that is 1 in 6 people, live in food insecure households. That's pretty astounding to me. And at the same time, 40% of all of the food grown in the United States literally goes to waste. And so Smith alumnus Evan Lutz saw a business opportunity in these dual problems. And what he did was he created a for-profit social enterprise called Hungry Harvest and literally built a market to bridge that gap and to solve that problem. So Hungry Harvest is sort of a unique take on the community-supported agriculture model. So the company, it recovers surplus fruits and vegetables from farmers and supermarkets, food that might be a little bit misshaped or beat up slightly, slightly imperfect or ugly, some people might say. And then they take this food and they sell it for reduced prices via a subscription model. And so for every bag of Hungry Harvest food purchased, it results in an equivalent amount of food donated to a local organization that's addressing food insecurity. And so literally what started as a classroom project grew to be a startup venture run from his parents' home in Colombia and has since expanded into, a fully functional business with legitimate, investors new product lines, and they're now reaching a regional market that expands across Maryland, DC, Virginia, Greater Philadelphia, Southern New Jersey, Northern Delaware, South Florida, North Carolina, and the Detroit metro area. And Evan is not done yet. So literally what was a huge issue of food insecurity and food waste, all that food that Evan is purchasing literally was just going to be left to rot in fields or was going to be dumped in landfills. And he's created a market, and he's solving a really important issue at the same time. And so that's just a, you know, I think that's just such a great example of what this principle really stands for. So I think I was probably talking pretty quickly through that, so I apologize if anybody's kind of losing me here. But those are our 5. So these are our 5 principles for a better business. I gave you a nice little snapshot of what these principles look like in action. It looks like we have plenty of time for discussion and dialogue, and I'm looking forward to that. And before we move into that, I'll leave you with one of my very favorite quotes as we transition to this conversation. Every single social and global issue of our day is really a business opportunity in disguise. So thank you, and I look forward to hearing what your questions are. Danielle, are you on the line and monitoring the question flow? I suspect, let's see. Okay. Looks like Danielle is on the line, but I'm not hearing her. I don't know if you all are. We do have some questions rolling in. Okay, so let's see here. I apologize for this little snafu. Seems like we've got a little bit of a tech issue with our call-in line here. All right. All right, I'm going to take some of these questions that I'll just take them in the order they're coming in here. How do businesses know if they are doing well or not well at these 5 principles? Anna, that's a really, really great question. So something that we didn't talk about today is the concept of metrics and impact measurement. And you know, in order for organizations to know internally and be able to show to the world externally that the work that they're doing matters and is having meaningful outcomes, absolutely, metrics need to be developed. There are quite a number of frameworks and existing methodologies for measure that range from, there's the B impact benefit corporation metric for social and environmental responsibility. ISO 26000 provides a nice outline and framework of all of the different pieces and components that can and maybe should be measured depending on your organization. And there's many more, and there's unique sets of metrics and measures for, you know, individual organizations. So I think what really counts is that you're having as an organization, you're having meaningful dialogue about embracing these principles. And then, based on your organization and your industry, how do they come to life? And what do you hope to achieve? So you do need to do some measurement and some benchmarking. Any type of metric that you do set, to the degree that it is applicable, it should be mapped back to some evidence-based, science-based metric or standard. And if you have more kind of in-depth questions or want some guidance on that, that's something, Anna, you or any others, you can follow up with me, and I could share some resources. Let's see. Having a little bit of a hard time with my chat window here. It's not quite expanding, so I apologize for my delay in getting to these questions. Let's see. Okay. How can lower level employees take part in this and encourage leaders to engage in being more socially responsible? Very good question. So I think that answer is a little bit nuanced, right? So it kind of depends on where you work, right? So I think that's step one. If you're with a corporate entity, chances are there's a CSR strategy already in place and there's some type of annual reporting happening around it. So definitely start there, read it, and know what it's about. And then if there are particular issues where you want to dig in more deeply, or where you think the company might be sort of missing the mark, find out who worked on the report and the people who are supporting the initiatives that are being showcased, and try to meet them, get in touch, start to have friendly conversations across the organization. As you learn more about it, you can become more educated on the issues that you'd like to affect. And I think, every organizational culture is different, but usually there is a team of people that are working on these strategies and these issues, and they almost always directly map up into senior leadership. So starting with those who you can connect with a little bit lower down in the organization and have meaningful dialogue, there's a good chance that if the things that you want to talk about and the ideas that you have to share, would be meaningfully heard. If you're in a smaller organization and there doesn't seem to be a clear strategy and you want to propose ideas, I would suggest reflecting on these 5 principles and thinking about, which ones seem most strategically relevant to your work and that of the company. And then again, kind of like looking back towards some of those corporate leaders who have been working on these strategies for years, getting a sense of what sort of like the baseline CSR activities tend to look like, and then the more progressive, and then consider, what might work at your organization. Your immediate supervisor might be a good place to start with your conversation, or, maybe even somebody within HR. Let's see. How does CSVC help support companies to create or recreate business models that embody these principles? That's a great question. We currently are not serving in that capacity. We're really focused on the student experience. But we do have a new partner model that we are just in the process of getting launched, called the Coalition for Better Business. And the idea of that coalition is to help bring some of these industry leaders inside of Smith to share best practices and skills and competency training that can help make our students more effective at delivering on these principles. And so, perhaps over time, as we continue to grow and scale that coalition model and the content around the principles, perhaps that is something we'll be able to offer, but at the present moment, we're not able to support in that way, unfortunately. Okay. So there was a question also about so it says these principles are pretty broad in scope. If this was intentional, why? And yes, so this is a really good question. Yes, these principles were designed to be broad in a sense, and they were also written to be fairly basic, using language that would feel comfortable to a larger or broader segment of the population. And we did this because we recognize that we're really at this critical point in human history. And now more than ever, we need all hands on deck to address this, great variety of social, environmental, and economic challenges that the world is facing today. So what the principles do is give us a specific framework and starting point, but they leave room for interpretation. And that interpretation is really important for how these principles will show up here at Smith across the business school. And that type of flexibility is also important for how they get sort of owned and realized within companies of different sizes across different industries. So we can't really write a one-size-fits-all script or prescription, but we can say that, if everyone is putting a genuine effort into bringing these principles to life in the best way that suits their industry, their organization, their market, then we feel that moves us closer to a world of economic, social, and environmental prosperity. And big picture, that's our end game. That's our goal. Looks like another question came in here. Oof. This is long. I'm having some trouble with my screen here, but let's see. Okay. How do you reconcile a business wanting to be more socially responsible with the politically correct legislation that limits that very principle? Here is an example. In volunteering with my niece's high school, this is a fundraiser program, they would work at concession stands in major sports venues. I was appalled at the end of the evening when all the food that was left over and was thrown away. When I questioned why it wasn't given to soup kitchens or homeless, I was told that it was required by law in case anyone would get sick. Looking at a company like what Hungry Harvest is doing, this would be another source of being able to decrease the food deficit. So what could a company do in face of this? What would be the best avenue or avenues to get it changed? Yeah, that's another good question. So this is, this gets right to that intersection of, government and industry, right? I mean, it's a rule that I've heard brought up before. It's an issue that I personally kind of have taken up. It's terrible to see that food go to waste when so many people, need the nourishment. I mean, business and industry is influential, right? But at the same time, they also have rules like this to protect companies, right? Because lawsuits have happened, things have gone awry, and there are some policies and regulations in place that are a little they're meant to be protective, but really end up creating these negative externalities that cause other problems instead of helping us address simply existing problems. I don't know if there's any one easy answer to that, but I think individuals need to be involved. Those rules show up in different places, so it's a matter of working at your local and regional levels to influence policy change. And I think that varies by municipality and by state. So again, kind of a tough one to say that there's like a one script that kind of fits the whole bill, but I definitely understand the pain point of that issue. And it doesn't make a whole lot of sense in my opinion, but I understand why that rule is in place. Looks like there might be another question coming through. Okay, so alumni, how can alumni get involved with CSVC? So another good question, love this one. So this coming academic year is really all about continuing to bring these principles to life through engaging experiences for our students. And it's also about building community. So if you're doing work that can help elevate or showcase some of these principles in action, I would absolutely love to hear from you. We can interview you, we can feature you in a web story, you could be part of our, you could be part of my talking points for my my pitch decks, and we can get you into the building for classroom engagements or even special events. I'm also looking to do a new initiative around alumni mentorship for our Impact Ambassadors program. So if you're really motivated by these principles and just by the potential of what social value can be and can look like, and you want to connect back with students who were in your shoes, a few years back, that could be a really great program for you. And I'm totally open to hearing new ideas as well. So if you have something that you want to propose, send me a note. If I haven't mentioned it today, I'd love to hear about it and know what you're thinking. Is there a way we can get a copy of the slide presentation? I do think Danielle will be sending out a follow-up email after the webinar that will have a link to the presentation and the audio from today. All right, it looks like the conversation thread is dying down just a little bit here. Any remaining thoughts or comments, questions? All right, it's been quiet here, so let's see. Okay, good. Okay, so we're still having some issues with Danielle's audio, but she did confirm through chat that yes, she will be sending the link out to everyone. So definitely stay tuned and look forward to that. And if you want to continue the conversation in any way, reach out. Danielle will also share out my contact information, but if you're interested right now, find me on LinkedIn, send me an email message. We can have a chat, we can meet for coffee. Very open to discussing these principles, further strengthening them and improving them. And your feedback is invaluable to do that. So very, very happy to engage further. Really appreciate you all making the time today and joining me for this webinar. I hope to hear from you in the very near future. And looks like we're going to hop off here a little bit early, so we all get about 15 minutes back in our afternoon. So I hope you make the most of it. And yeah, we'll call it a wrap. So thank you again, and I hope you all have a good day.